Washington Journal continues.
Not only does our guest represent Georgia, the 6th District there, but Representative Tom Price is also the chairman of the Republican Policy Committee. Welcome, sir.
Thanks, Pedro. Great to be with you.
For the third time in 3 days, the president's going to announce proposals that work around Congress. What's the message to Congress?
Well, I think the message to Congress is that we hope that he begins to work with us. What the House Republicans have done repeatedly over the past 10 months is to put bill after bill after bill in the Senate, sitting on Harry Reid's desk, that will in fact create jobs. So we hope the president gives Harry Reid a call and says, why don't we begin working together so we can solve these remarkable challenges that
because you deal with policy and economic issues. What's the economic ramifications of what the president's proposing, especially if he plans to go around Congress?
Well, what he's proposed to date is simply what's been done so far, which has resulted in significantly increased unemployment, no real job creation, all sorts of uncertainty out there in the market for both small and large job creators. And so that's why we find ourselves in this really troubling time right now, which is why we have called on the president to come back to Washington. Let's work together and solve these challenges. I don't think that the economy is interested in a president that is going to be out there freelancing it. I think what the economy wants to know is that the people here in Washington, the leaders that they have elected, are going to work together and solve the challenges.
He targets student loans. What's been the Republican response to how students handled their loans, especially as they graduate college with debt?
Well, look, there are remarkable challenges out there, especially for students. And the best thing we can do for student loans is to create a vibrant job market, a vibrant economy, so that they're able to pay back the loans that they took. The solution is not to have government insert itself at every single turn. The solution is to work together to get this economy rolling, which is why we've created our jobs creation plan and put forward all sorts of pieces of legislation, again, that are stacking up in the Senate.
So when it comes for calls for consolidation, then is that good or bad for the federal government to be involved in that?
Well, you never know what the president's talking about until you see the writing on the piece of paper. And he gives a great speech, as everybody knows. But once we see the specific proposal that he has, there are committees on education in both the House and the Senate, and we'll work through that process and see whether or not it's something that we can support.
When it comes to financial issues, there's a hearing today which will air with the super committee as far as Doug Elmendorf coming before the committee. Are you concerned about reaching a deadline and coming up with a final plan before that deadline?
Well, the deadline is short. There's no doubt about it. November 23rd is when the committee has to report to Congress. It actually is a little sooner than that because of the logistics that have to be done to get the bill ready for Congress to consider. But all of that being said, what we want to do is to work together to decrease spending at the federal level so that we can reinvigorate the economy and put in place our jobs plan.
So as far as the actual super committee work, what about the aspects that you've heard probably in the last couple of days, especially one aspect, the drawdown costs for Iraq and Afghanistan? Should that be in the total tally as far as the $1.2 trillion is concerned?
We've never supported that because that's not funny money, but it's not money that is actually being spent by the federal government. We believe that, as we put forward in our budget earlier this year, that you can actually get $6 trillion in savings if you go about this in a very methodical, logical, and compassionate fashion. We believe that you got to fundamentally reform Medicare and Medicaid so that you can save those programs. There's a path to get to saving Social Security instead of doing what the president has proposed and in fact passed in the last Congress, which is to take $500 billion out of the Medicare system. We think that doesn't make any sense for seniors.
If the figure happens not to be $1.2 trillion, how will those in Congress react, especially as there are stories about lining up votes even now to support what comes out of the super committee, regardless of what the final tally is?
Well, no votes being lined up at this point. What we're hopeful is that the super committee, the select committee that was appointed, will in fact produce a work product that both the House and the Senate can respond to positively. The problem with sequestration, which is where you get money if the committee doesn't get to $1.2 trillion, is that it's an across-the-board cut. Some of that's attractive to some folks. The problem is, as a surgeon, I can tell you that it's better to reduce things with a scalpel, not with a machete. And so when you cut things absolutely across the board, then you're cutting some things that ought to be reduced in terms of spending, and you're reducing some spending where things ought not be reduced because they ought to be priorities for our country.
And what would be examples of both of those categories?
Well, you can find examples on both the security and the non-security side. There are some areas in the area of defense, for example, the size of our force in terms of the Army. If you just take a slice across the top of the budget for the Army, then you actually get into individuals, personnel, that may not be wise for our country. In the area of health care, for something that's near and dear to my heart, saving Medicare, if you just whack across Medicare with a certain amount, then you may reduce spending in an area that ought to be increased as opposed to decreased for specific diseases.
Our guest with us until 8:30.